I didn't call a lawyer when I found my husband in bed with another woman. I called her husband and told him I wanted a seat at his table. Lisa sat on the edge of the bed and watched the video for the 10th time. Daniel looked pathetic, laughing that fake, forced laugh he used when he was trying to be charming. But it was the woman that mattered. Specifically, the diamond snake watch on her wrist. That little serpent belonged to Han So-yeon. "Well, Daniel?" Lisa said to the empty room. "You really picked the wrong one." She didn't cry. She didn't pack a bag. She just pulled up a number she'd been saving for a rainy day and hit dial. It picked up on the second ring, but the person on the other end didn't say a word. "Your wife is at the Hyatt, room 412, Lisa said. She kept her voice flat, even though her pulse was racing. "My husband is with her. I'm guessing they aren't there to talk business." A long silence followed. Then, a voice that sounded like a crisp, new $100 bill being snapped tight. "And why are you telling me this, Lisa?" "Because I want to burn their world down," she said, looking out at the city lights. "But I want to keep the ashes. I know how you operate, Jae-hyun. I want in." 3 minutes. Silver sedan at the curb," he said. The line went dead. Lisa grabbed her coat and walked out. She didn't bother locking the door. Let Daniel find it open when he finally decided to crawl home. The car was idling right where he said it would be. She hopped in the back, and the door closed with a heavy thud. Jae-hyun was sitting there in a dark suit, looking at a tablet like he was just finishing up a boring day at the office. He didn't even look up at first. "You're 30 seconds late," he said. "I had to find my shoes," Lisa snapped, sliding across the leather. "Are we going to talk about the clock, or are we going to talk about how we're going to handle this?" He finally turned his head. He didn't look like a movie villain. He just looked focused. "I don't do drama, Lisa," he said. "If I move on this, they don't get a slap on the wrist. They lose everything. You okay with that?" Lisa looked at him for a long second. "I've been the perfect wife for 5 years, Jae-hyun. Being the villain sounds like a promotion." The silver sedan pulled up to a side entrance of a building that didn't have a sign. Lisa followed Jae-hyun inside, past 2 guys who looked like they were carved out of granite, and into a lounge that was way too quiet. There was no music, no clinking glasses, just a low-slung table with 2 folders and a pen that looked like it cost more than her first car. "Sit," Jae-hyun said. He didn't pull out her chair. He just dropped into his own and waited. Lisa didn't hesitate. She sat, crossed her legs, and pushed the folder toward him. Inside were the bank statements she'd been quietly screen-grabbing for months. Daniel thought he was being clever, moving money into offshore accounts to fund his investments, but he was really just funding So-yeon's taste for vintage Cartier. "That's half of Daniel's liquidity," Lisa said. "And that's just the stuff he's hidden from me. I can get the rest, but I need your leverage to freeze his access before he realizes I'm gone." Jae-hyun didn't even blink. He flipped through the pages with those long, steady fingers. "And what do you think I want with your husband's petty millions, Lisa? I have enough money to buy this entire block twice over." "I'm not offering you money," she said, leaning forward. "I'm offering you the ports. Daniel's firm handles the logistics for the entire Eastern Corridor. You want that infrastructure. You've wanted it for years." He stopped flipping the pages. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a second, the air in the room felt like it had been sucked out. He wasn't looking at a grieving wife. He was looking at a shark. You're willing to hand me your husband's entire legacy just to watch him fail? I'm willing to hand it to us, Lisa corrected him. We get married. We merge the firms. We trigger the morality clauses in their prenups using the footage I have. They walk away with nothing but the clothes on their backs and each other. Let's see how long their love lasts when they're broke. Jae-hyun picked up the pen. He spun it once between his knuckles. It's not a marriage, he said. It's a hostile takeover. Exactly, Lisa said. He signed his name in a jagged, elegant scrawl and pushed the paper toward her. Lisa took the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She signed her name right next to his, and just like that, the perfect wife was dead. Congratulations, Jae-hyun said, his voice dry. You're now the most dangerous woman in Seoul. Try not to make me regret it. The lobby of the grand estate was a sea of black ties and forced smiles, the kind of place where everyone is looking over someone's shoulder for a bigger player. Lisa felt the weight of the silk gown against her skin. It was blood red and cut low enough to be a warning. She didn't look at the cameras. She didn't have to. Beside her, Jae-hyun didn't offer his arm. He just walked with a heavy, deliberate pace that made people step back without even knowing why. There they are, Jae-hyun said, his voice barely a breath. 10 o'clock. Lisa didn't turn her head immediately. She waited. She took a flute of champagne from a passing tray, took a tiny sip, and then let her gaze wander. Daniel was standing near the fountain, looking smug in a tuxedo that Lisa had picked out for him 3 months ago. So-yeon was draped over his arm, wearing that same diamond snake watch, laughing at something he'd said. Then Daniel looked up. His face didn't just fall, it turned a gray, dusty color that made Lisa want to laugh. He dropped his glass. It didn't shatter, it just thudded onto the thick carpet, spilling gold liquid all over his shoes. So-yeon froze, her eyes darting from Lisa to Jae-hyun, the color draining out of her lips until she looked like a ghost in couture. Keep walking, Jae-hyun murmured. Don't give them the satisfaction of a scene. They cut through the crowd like a blade. When they reached the center of the room, Jae-hyun finally placed a hand on the small of Lisa's back. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a claim. The room went quiet. That awkward, heavy silence that happens when people realize the hierarchy just got rewritten in real time. Daniel stumbled over, leaving So-yeon standing alone, like a discarded prop. Lisa? What the hell is this? What are you doing with him? Lisa didn't flinch. She didn't even look at his eyes. She looked at his messy, wine-stained shoes. Oh, Daniel, I thought you liked surprises. We're here to celebrate the merger. What merger? Daniel stammered, his voice climbing an octave. Jae-hyun stepped forward, just an inch, but it was enough to make Daniel flinch. The one that makes you irrelevant, Jae-hyun said. He leaned in, his voice conversational and terrifying. Go find your drink, Daniel. You're going to need it for the walk home. Lisa smiled, and for the first time in years, it felt real. She turned her back on her husband and walked deeper into the party with a man who didn't love her, but knew exactly how to help her win. The warfare had started, and she hadn't even broken a sweat. The private jet hadn't even touched the tarmac in Seoul before the phone started screaming. Lisa sat across from Jae-hyun, watching him move through 3 different burners like he was playing a high-speed game of chess. He looked exhausted. There were shadows under his eyes that no amount of expensive lighting could hide, and for the first time, he didn't look like a titan. He just looked like a man holding back a landslide with his bare hands. The Japanese contingent is pulling out, Jae-hyun said, tossing a phone onto the leather seat. They heard rumors about the instability with So-yeon's family. They think I'm distracted. If they walk, the shipping merger dies, and Daniel gets his leverage back. He rubbed his face, his wedding band, the one that matched hers, catching the dim cabin light. It was a cold, heavy piece of metal that felt more like a shackle than a vow. "They don't think you're distracted," Lisa said, reaching over and picking up the tablet he'd discarded. "They think you're vulnerable. There's a difference." She swiped through the logistics data, her brain already rewiring the numbers. She'd spent a decade making mediocre men look like geniuses. Saving a man who actually had a brain was almost too easy. By the time they reached the black car waiting on the runway, she had the plan. 2 hours later, they were in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the Han River. The Japanese investors sat like stone statues, their arms crossed. Jae-hyun was tense, his hand hovering near his jacket, a habit he had when things were about to get ugly. Lisa didn't wait for him to speak. She stood up, walked to the head of the table, and laid out a restructured tax incentive that didn't just cover their losses, it tripled their projected dividends by rerouting Daniel's old supply lines through Jae-hyun's private ports. The room stayed silent for a long beat. Then, the lead investor nodded. Just once. When the doors finally closed behind them, the silence in the hallway was different. Jae-hyun stopped by the elevators and just looked at her. He didn't say, "Thank you," or "Good job." He just watched her, his gaze dropping for a split second to the way she held her head. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I'm an equal partner, Jae-hyun, not a trophy." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes. He didn't smell like the sterile car anymore. He just smelled like the cold night air and sheer, grinding effort. "I've spent my life surrounded by people who want something from me," he said, his voice dropping to that low, paper-thin rasp. "I forgot what it looked like to have someone actually bring something to the table." He reached out, his thumb brushing the gold chain at her throat, a touch so brief she almost missed it. "Maybe I didn't just marry a strategist. Maybe I married the only person in this city I don't have to watch my back around." Lisa felt a sharp, unfamiliar tug in her chest. It wasn't love. It was something much more dangerous. Respect. Lisa didn't wait for the morning news to break. She sat in the kitchen of the safe house, barefoot, drinking coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Beside her, Jae-hyun was on his laptop, his face lit by the blue glare of a dozen spreadsheets. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was the kind of quiet you share with someone right before the first bomb drops. "Check the wires," Lisa said, checking her watch. "It's 9:01. The board meeting just started." She'd spent the last 3 nights digging through Daniel's discretionary spending. It wasn't hard. Daniel was the kind of man who thought he was too important to get caught, so he left a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to his ego. She'd leaked the documents to the 3 most aggressive shareholders at 4 a.m., proof that Daniel had been skimming company funds to pay off So-yeon's gambling debts in Macau. Jae-hyun leaned back, a small, grim twist at the corner of his mouth. "The stocks are tumbling. They just called an emergency vote. He's out, Lisa. Not in a month. Right now." Lisa didn't feel the rush of victory she'd expected. She just felt a deep, settled sense of justice. She picked up her phone and dialed Daniel's direct line. He picked up on the first ring, his voice sounding frantic, like he was drowning in shallow water. "Lisa? Lisa, thank God. Everything is falling apart. The board, the press. Someone leaked the Macau files. You have to help me spin this. You're the strategist, remember? You can fix this." Lisa looked at Jae-hyun. He was watching her, his expression unreadable, waiting to see if she'd go soft. "I'm not the strategist for the Okoye group anymore, Daniel," she said, her voice smooth and easy, like she was discussing the weather. "I'm the majority shareholder of the firm that just bought your debt. And honestly, I think the spin is that you're a liability we can no longer afford." "What? What are you talking about?" "Check your email, Daniel. It's a formal notice of termination. Don't bother packing your desk. Security is already putting your things in a cardboard box on the sidewalk." She hung up before he could beg. She tossed the phone onto the marble counter and let out a long, shaky breath. Jae-hyun stood up and walked over to her. He didn't offer a hug, but he placed a hand on the counter right next to hers, his presence steady and grounded. "That was cold," he said. He didn't sound like he was complaining. He sounded impressed. "He taught me everything I know about loyalty," Lisa said, looking up at him. "It's only fair I showed him how well I learned the lesson." Jae-hyun reached out and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm, a stark contrast to the ice in her veins. "The first strike is always the hardest. You did well, partner." Lisa didn't look away. The wind felt good, but the way Jae-hyun was looking at her, like she was the only person in the room who actually mattered, felt a whole lot better. The glass didn't shatter like it does in the movies. It exploded into a fine, sparkling dust that coated the dinner table. Lisa didn't even have time to scream before Jae-hyun was over the table, his weight slamming into her and dragging her down to the floor. The sound of the second shot was muffled, a heavy thud into the upholstery of the chair where she'd been sitting seconds ago. "Stay down," Jae-hyun hissed. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the window, his hand already deep inside his jacket. He didn't look like the polished businessman anymore. The mask was gone. He looked like a wolf backed into a corner. He grabbed her arm, hard enough to leave a bruise, and dragged her toward the service elevator. They ended up in a safe house on the outskirts of the city, a concrete box that felt more like a bunker than a home. No silk sheets here, no marble, just a single light bulb and the sound of the rain hitting the metal roof. Jae-hyun sat on the edge of a crate, his shirt torn at the shoulder, a jagged red line weeping blood down his arm. Lisa didn't ask if he was okay. She just grabbed the first aid kit from the wall and knelt between his knees. "Hold still," she said. He tried to pull away, his jaw tight. "I can do it myself, Lisa. Go sit down." "Shut up, Jae-hyun." She didn't use a gentle touch. She cleaned the wound with a sting of antiseptic that made his breath hitch, not out of romance, but out of raw pain. For a long time, the only sound was the rustle of gauze. But as she worked, she realized he was shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer, crushing weight of keeping everything from falling apart. He looked down at her, his eyes dark and tired. "They're coming for me because of the merger, because I took you. I put a target on your back." Lisa stopped winding the bandage. She looked up at him, her hand still resting on his bicep. "I put the target there myself the second I called you. Don't start acting like a martyr now. It doesn't suit you." Jae-hyun reached out, his clean hand catching the back of her neck. He pulled her closer, until their foreheads were touching. He didn't smell like laundry starch anymore. He smelled like sweat and iron, and the cold reality of almost dying. "I thought I wanted a partner," he whispered, his voice a rough, broken thing. "But I think I just wanted someone who wouldn't leave when the lights went out." Lisa didn't pull away. She leaned into him, letting the silence of the bunker swallow them both. The walls were closing in, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she was being caged. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The burner phone Lisa kept in her nightstand vibrated against the wood like a trapped insect. She didn't want to pick it up. She knew the vibration pattern, 3 short pulses. It was Daniel. He was desperate, and desperate men are loud. "What do you want, Daniel?" she said, her voice echoing in the empty hallway of the safe house. "Lisa, listen to me," he gasped. He sounded like he was running, or crying, maybe both. You think you're winning? You think Jae-hyun is your partner? Check the files for the 2022 port expansion, the ones he keeps in the black leather ledger. I'm hanging up. He set you up, Lisa. Before I ever met Seo-yeon, Jae-hyun was already shorting our stock. He didn't just stumble into this. He targeted us. He used me to get to you because he knew you were the only one who could bridge his assets to the Western Corridor. The affair? He let it happen. He practically gift-wrapped my idiocy so you'd run straight to him. Lisa felt a cold, dull thud in her stomach. You're lying. Am I? Ask him about the Project Siren folder. Ask him why your name was on a payroll manifest 6 months before we even moved to Seoul. He didn't marry you for revenge, Lisa. He married you because you were the final piece of his portfolio. She ended the call and stood in the kitchen, the silence of the house suddenly feeling like a threat. Jae-hyun was in the study, his silhouette visible through the frosted glass door. He looked steady. He looked like the man who had pulled her under a table while glass rained down on them. She walked in without knocking. He didn't look up from his papers. Daniel called, she said. Jae-hyun's pen stopped. He didn't move, didn't flinch. He's a dying man, Lisa. He'll say anything to stay underwater. He told me to ask you about Project Siren. Now he looked up. The warmth she'd started to see in his eyes over the last few days was gone, replaced by that flat, impenetrable granite. He didn't deny it. He didn't offer a quick lie. He just watched her, his fingers tapping a slow, rhythmic beat on the mahogany desk. Is it true? She asked, her voice cracking just enough to hate herself for it. Was I just a line item on a spreadsheet before we ever met? Jae-hyun stood up slowly, the height of him suddenly feeling like a wall. Here's the thing about the world I live in, Lisa. I scout talent long before I acquire it. But don't confuse the start of the deal with the way it ends. That's not a no, Lisa whispered. She looked at the man she'd started to trust and realized she might have just traded one cage for a much more expensive one. He didn't move to comfort her. He just stood there, waiting to see if his star player was going to walk off the board. Seo-yeon wasn't the type to go down quietly, and Lisa should have seen that coming. While Daniel was busy crying into his phone, Seo-yeon was in a back room in Gangnam, trading the only thing she had left, her husband's private security codes. She didn't care about the money anymore. She just wanted to see the look on Lisa's face when the empire collapsed. The news hit the kitchen table like a lead weight. Jae-hyun's lead enforcer walked in, his face tight, and dropped a tablet in front of them. It was a live feed of the shipping docks. Half the cranes were frozen, and a group of men in gray suits, the ones who worked for the rival Choi Syndicate, were already moving into the perimeter. She gave them the back door, Jae-hyun said. He didn't sound angry. He sounded hollow, like he'd expected the floor to give out eventually. The Chois don't want a merger. They want a liquidation, starting with us. Lisa felt the air get heavy. This wasn't about bank accounts or board seats anymore. This was about whether they'd make it to breakfast. They're moving on the safe house, the enforcer added. We have 10 minutes, maybe less. Lisa didn't panic. She didn't have the energy for it. She just looked at the screen and then at Jae-hyun. If they take the docks, we lose the leverage. Everything we've built for the last month becomes their property. We're not just broke, Jae-hyun. We're ghosts. Jae-hyun reached into the drawer and pulled out a heavy black handgun. He checked the clip with a metallic snick that made Lisa's skin crawl. I can get you to the border. You have the offshore accounts. You can disappear. Is that what you think this is? Lisa snapped, grabbing her coat. I didn't burn my life to the ground just to go into hiding in some villa.
If Seo-yeon wants to play for blood, then we give it to her. But we do it my way. She grabbed her own laptop, her fingers flying over the keys. They think they have the codes, but they don't know about the secondary firewall I installed yesterday. If they try to force the gate, the whole system loops. It'll trap them inside the docks like rats in a cage. Jae-hyun looked at her, and for a second, the fear in his eyes was replaced by something dark and appreciative. You're going to trap the Choi's? That's suicide. No, Lisa said, slamming the laptop shut. That's business. Now get the car. We're going to the docks. The rain finally stopped, leaving the docks dripping and smelling like salt and old grease.
We were sitting in the back of the car, parked in the shadow of a massive shipping container, watching the red lights of the security cameras blink. The Choi Syndicate was already inside the perimeter. You could hear the muffled shouts of men, realizing the gates weren't opening. Jae-hyun didn't look at the monitors. He reached into his vest and pulled out a small, battered silver thumb drive. He held it between his thumb and forefinger for a second, then dropped it into Lisa's palm. "What is this?" she asked. "It's everything," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were bloodshot. "It's the shell companies, the payrolls, the encrypted keys to the ports. It's the stuff that keeps me alive, and the stuff that could put me away for a dozen lifetimes. If you upload that to the cloud, my entire world vanishes. I'm just a guy in an expensive suit with nowhere to go." Lisa looked at the drive, then back at him. "Why are you giving this to me now? We're in the middle of a war." "Because you think you're a line item," he said, and for the first time, he reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, but he was shaking, just a little. "You think I'm playing you, so here's the kill switch. If you think I'm Daniel, or if you think I'm just using you to bridge a gap, then use it. Wipe me out. I won't even try to stop you." Lisa felt the weight of the drive. It felt like a stone. She'd spent her whole life trying to get enough leverage to keep people from hurting her, and now, the most dangerous man she'd ever met had just handed her his throat and told her to choose a blade. "If I do this, you lose everything," she whispered. "I'd rather be broke and honest with you than king of a city where you don't trust me," he said. He didn't lean in to kiss her. He didn't make a grand speech. He just let go of her hand and looked out the window at the men closing in on their position. He was leaving it up to her. Lisa looked at the laptop sitting on her lap, the cursor blinking, waiting for a command. She could end it all right now. She could walk away a billionaire and leave him to the Choi's. She looked at the drive, then shoved it deep into her pocket. "Keep your empire, Jae-hyun," she said, her voice turning back into steel. "I think I'd rather help you run it." Lisa didn't need a gun to finish this. She just needed a stable connection and the 3 minutes of footage she'd been holding on to like a lucky coin. While the Choi Syndicate was busy pounding on the locked gates of the docks, she hit send on an anonymous blast to every major news outlet in the country. It wasn't just the affair. It was the digital paper trail of Daniel's embezzlement and So-yeon's signatures on the port security leaks. The fallout was instant. By the time the sun started to creep over the horizon, Daniel's accounts were frozen by the federal regulators. He wasn't just fired, he was a pariah. And So-yeon? The woman who thought she could trade her husband's life for a seat at the Choi table was currently being escorted to a private jet with a one-way ticket to a country with no extradition and even less luxury. She was out. Erased. Lisa sat back in the car and watched the chaos unfold on her screen. Beside her, Jae-hyun was quiet. He'd spent the last hour on the phone with the Minister of Trade, using the data Lisa had polished to frame the dock lockdown as a heroic security measure against a hostile foreign takeover. His standing wasn't just solid, he was untouchable. "It's done,"
Lisa said, closing the laptop. The screen went black, reflecting her tired, steady eyes. Daniel is broke, So-Yun is gone, and you're the city's new favorite patriot. Jae-hyun didn't look at the screen. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small piece of paper, the original contract they'd signed in that dark lounge, and tore it into tiny white flakes. He let them fall onto the floor of the car like confetti for a party nobody else was invited to. "What are you doing?" Lisa asked. "That was our agreement." "We don't have an agreement anymore," he said. He reached over and took her hand, and this time, there was no shake, just heat. The contract was for revenge. This is something else. He didn't smell like a sterile office or cold fear. He just smelled like the dawn. Lisa looked out at the city, the empire she'd helped save, and then back at the man who had given her the keys to his life. "So," she said, a small, genuine smile tugging at her mouth. "What's our move for tomorrow?" Jae-hyun leaned in, his forehead resting against hers in the quiet of the car. "Whatever you want, Lisa. You're the one running the board."